Cuba has 11 ports of promise. We imagine and desire to visit at least 3 ports during the 7-day trip itineraries that we'll be taking to Cuba. So it's a little bit different than what we're doing in the Dominican Republic because in Cuba it's a cultural immersion, it's an education process. It's really just the beginning of what we believe will be a beautiful and very lasting friendship.
It provides, of course, ammunition for some critics about the engagement with Cuba to say a company like Carnival that has a floating hotel that comes in isn't really providing a whole lot of economic engagement with Cuba because the passengers are sleeping not in hotels, they're not eating necessarily in restaurants, they're just dayside doing these cultural exchanges which have limited economic impact.
Yeah, as you can imagine, there are always critics who are going to say things. My encouragement to them is to get to know us, have an experience with us. If you're familiar with the P2P guidelines, travelers have to spend 8 hours a day in allowable authorized activities. That includes
P2P,
meals.
People to people.
Yeah, that includes meals on the ground in Cuba. Then it includes small business interaction and support. So from an economic development standpoint, there is no question that the impact that we will have will be incredibly favorable and positive for the Cuban people.
Are there conditions that Carnival wouldn't accept if the Cuban government were to put certain...
We don't foresee a situation that even gets to that, right? We're in very good, positive, active discussions, and we look forward to working together and understanding from the Cuban side what we need to do to be successful together.
One of the chief critics of engagement has been Florida Senator Marco Rubio, of course, running for the presidential nomination for the Republican Party. And he wrote this week in a New York Times opinion piece, when we make engagement with the odious leaders of these countries, our foreign policy, we make a Faustian bargain that is contrary to our national values and also our strategic interests. Does Carnival effort and fathom against U.S. national values?
I think that's a pretty, it's clearly an emotional and heated topic and issue, and I think, it's hard to understand and imagine from those Cuban American families that have a deep history and pain and challenges that have happened, and yet, so we empathize a lot with the complexity, and yet we still look at the beauty of the Cuban people and the opportunities that we have if we can all sort of join hands together and really explore developing economic development as well as just these cultural exchanges that will ultimately benefit the country and the Cuban people.
And of course the criticism goes beyond just Senator Rubio. Even former Florida Governor Jeb Bush, who's of course also running for the GOP nomination and president, has spoken out against the Obama administration's engagement efforts. And in part they point out that while people-to-people exchanges may be culturally beneficial, ultimately the way the Cuban economy works is it winds up in the hands of the Castro regime. So what are you looking for? What is Carnival and Fathom looking for in terms of its on-the-ground partners to assure that that risk is reduced, if not eliminated?
Yeah, well, I think that we're all in early days in terms of a new relationship with Cuba. And I think just by the news that we've received from Obama here in the last couple of weeks with the opening of embassies, there are clearly very active discussions happening between the two countries, right? And our hope and intent and spirit is to continue to build favorable relationships with the Cuban people, right, and with Cuban authorities. And I think we're all looking forward to a different era, because the era that we've been through has not necessarily solved any of the challenges between the countries. And so we're excited about this as really a bridge, between our travelers and the people of Cuba.